All of you know Unfound as a podcast. It comes out at 2 p.m. Eastern every Friday. In fact, very few Fridays over the past 9.5 years have been missed. Well, today you get to hear about the work going on behind the scenes and what it means for the podcast itself. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. I've been wanting to do this show for a while now, but I didn't think I quite had enough to talk about. But surely within the past 2 months, that has changed. So I thought, well, I want to talk to everybody about all of this. I want to tell you about all of this. I have mentioned bits and pieces of it over the past several months, maybe even year. But it's on the live show. It's in some of the updates in the episodes. And I just thought I need to do an episode so all of you can hear it all at the same time. Very complete, very thorough. I'm not going to miss anything. I have the notes in front of me because I think you're all going to find what I have to say very interesting. Now, granted, because this is ongoing work, I can't say everything. But I think you are going to get a better understanding of me, my attitude toward at least the next year, if not several years, and my continuing evolution about how I see the work that is done here. And I'll get into that more toward the end of this episode that I think probably is going to be an hour long, somewhere in there. I don't know how long because I'm just starting the recording right now. But I think it's going to be very informative for all of you. And maybe this is more honesty and things that you're going to hear in this episode maybe than you're going to hear by any podcast host out there ever talking about their work and where everything is headed. So let's get started. Like I said, I've touched upon this here and there with a live show that comes, that of course are done every Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, where I do talk about things that are going on here at Unfound. Of course, I also talk about true crime news, and I've, over the past, 8-9 months, I've been picking out a disappearance to analyze every week, and I've really enjoyed that. But I wanted to give you a more complete idea, and there are really 3 big projects behind the scenes going on at Unfound right now. 2 of them are surely going to become episodes eventually. In fact, 1 is surely going to be a series. But there is one, and I'll tell you which is which when we get there. 1, I'm not sure if it's going to be an episode, although certainly when we get to the end of that project, I will tell you what has transpired. And the reason I wanted to do this is because my perception is that almost all other podcasters or YouTube hosts, whoever, my perception is they only work on stuff that will eventually be for public consumption. And I'm here to tell you there's probably at least one project that is going on behind the scenes that may not. Maybe it will. I'm not making any guarantees on that one. Like I said, I'll tell you which one it is. But as I mentioned the word evolution earlier, this is an evolution. I wouldn't necessarily say a transition, but an evolution to moving outside of the internet into the real world. And like I said, I will get into that later. So you might want to think of this overall, because some of you have been with Unfound for a long time. Probably the first taste you got of this was way back in 2019. It's hard to believe that's 7 years ago now. But when I worked with some help from Assistant Cherie on the disappearance of Cameron Remmer, you'll remember that eventually did become an episode. I think it was like a 4-hour episode, maybe longer than that, because I did interview his mother, and then I also detailed everything that had been worked on that previous year, really, really, really trying to narrow down as best we could. Give a better idea of narrowing down the possibilities of what could have happened to Cameron. And, of course, he is still missing. Very sad. Well, 3 of those kind of projects are now going on, but it's more than just myself working on them or just getting a bit of assistance from somebody. In fact, there's other people devoting considerable amount of time, and I'm working in conjunction with some families, and they're doing work too. Whereas looking back at Cameron's, certainly his family, very helpful. Friends, very helpful. Talk to me. And I thank all of them providing me with information and everything. But it was really just me calling people, emailing people. Things are different now. But if you really want to just get an idea before I get into this, if you remember all that work with Cameron Remmer, still I think one of the best episodes I've done. And I will stick by my idea that I think there was still something suspicious regarding his disappearance. I'm not convinced that he just strode off into the night in San Francisco and disappeared. I'm not convinced of that at all. But that is the framework in which I am working with others now. But where I'm first going to start, and I think this is part of it, even though it's not a project, is I want to tell you that I will be appearing at a function called Private Icon, and I know that has to be the most ironic thing in the world, that for me to show up at something that has the words Private Eye in it, given what I've said about that profession over the years. But it's really, I'm guessing there are going to be some private investigators there. But this is a convention, I think somewhat different from CrimeCon, that's going to be held at Middle Tennessee State University from May 15th to May 17th. And I will be there. And I've been invited to come. And so I'm very excited to go. We'll see how it goes. All of you know how I feel about big events like this and everything, but I've convinced myself that it's going to be different than CrimeCon, which I'm not going to get into that now. But like I said, I think this is a part of the evolution of me, of the way I see my work doing this podcast, my attitude toward working on disappearances hands-on instead of just being an interviewer and a reporter, but taking my abilities, my skills, my experience into the real world. It's probably how you should look at me appearing there. Going to be on some panels. I'm going to stay in my lane. Friend of the podcast, John Lorden, you all know him. He's the one that facilitated me being included in this gathering in May, and I really thank John for that. But I am a specialist. I only work on unsolved disappearances, except for, of course, for the weirdly, once again, ironically, the thing that I've become well known for is interviewing Steve Pankey. But I'm just going to stay in my lane. Only going to do disappearance stuff there. Of course, there will be a whole host of, I think, of different panels and topics there. And but with my work, really limited on what I can do. Certainly, I've talked about serial killers and all sorts of topics like on the live show. But in that particular forum, certainly I'm going to stick to my expertise. If you're wondering if, can you show up? Are there tickets and everything? You should look that up probably online. Private Icon. It's private. And then EYECON, May 15th to 17th, Middle Tennessee State University. Might want to look that up. If you live in the area, I'm not saying you should drive across the United States or anything, but I will be there, and we'll see how it goes, and maybe we will run into each other. So it's an appearance, but the way I'm looking at the year 2026, it is much more than that. So that's the first thing behind the scenes going on. I know I've mentioned it in the update parts of some of these episodes, but now I get to talk about it a little longer. And it, like I said, it was facilitated through John Lorden. He, asked me about it a few months ago. I'm going to maybe say November, maybe something like that, or December. And it is going to happen. Of course, John's going to be there too. I know him, but I've never met him. And so we'll meet for the first time there. Who knows who else will be there. All right, now on to the first project that is going on behind the scenes. The first one is Haydar Abu Shakra, and I don't think it's a coincidence. John Lorden and I are working on this together, and I'm not going to, he's done some nice work. He's gathering up some news articles and everything. We're kind of split work, kind of, and we had a Zoom meeting about a week and a half ago that I appeared late for, which is totally unlike me, and I had to apologize to John over and over. I was like 15 minutes late. That's horrible. Bad Ed. But how this transpired and why it's become a project, why is this a little more than me just, as I usually do, interviewing a family member and then, getting all the information coming, interviewing that person and you all hearing about it. Well, how it came about, first of all, and it was very simple. At the end of last year, I took a look to see what states in the United States had not yet been covered by Unfound, and Connecticut was one of them, although we now know that Connecticut has been covered due to Thomas Dolan, but there are a few other states that we still have to get to, Hawaii being one of them. But I started going, I'm just going to be honest with you. Sometimes this is just the way you have to do it. I just started going down through the list of unsolved disappearances in the state of Connecticut, alphabetically, starting in the A's. And I got to Haydar's, of course, Abu Shakra. It's right there at the beginning. And I was able to track down his niece, Dana. So she's who I've been coordinating with, and we've already had one conversation. But what also was going on, what also happened back in December with John asking me about Private Icon is we started talking about, well, we need to work together on something in 2026. It's been a few years, of course. The one and only time was with Jason Landry, and I thought that went really, really well, although Jason is still missing. And you might also remember back during COVID, I appeared on a game show which John hosted. You all remember that? Maybe, I don't know how many of you were around back then. But that was good fun, too, and we should do that again. But he and I had talked about working together, and I came across Haydar's disappearance and talked to his niece, and right away I was like, you know what? I think this is a good one for John and I to work together on. Of course, he does what he does. I do what I do. And that's what's eventually going to happen. This is obviously, eventually, you're going to hear all about this. But there's a lot going on here. Can't say what. That would be unfair. And in fact, I think we're a little early. I don't know when this is going to happen, when it's going to be made public. John and I have agreed that we're not going to rush this. He has more than enough work to do. I have more than enough work to do. But I am continuing to reach out to people. If I talk to anybody, I collect the information, send it to John. And like I said, he's doing his own stuff as well. But that's how it came about. And it's one of those things, the reason it's become a project, not maybe a long-term project, but maybe a short to medium-term project, is if we're going to do the coverage of this disappearance, we really have to understand whether this is a regular disappearance. And you can go to the Charlie Project or NamUs and read the general facts of Haydar's disappearance. Or is it something else? I mean, he went missing. That's beyond doubt. But why did he go missing? How did he go missing? It certainly seems like there was foul play, but was there? And can somebody be taken and it not be foul play? How about that? And there, we're going to have to take a look at some government entities and things like that. And I just didn't think, once again, in talking to Dana that first time, that, this is not something that is straightforward. None of this is easy, but is straightforward as interviewing her and just allowing the chips to fall where they may, which is really what I do. I don't spoon feed you theories on the podcast. I have my own theories. I write about them at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. It comes out every Sunday. But for the podcast, it's just a presentation. Try to get as much information out of the guest. You make your own decisions. The problem, as I ran on early on, is if we did it that way, it still would just be too vague. And there were things here that she told me that was like, we have to talk about it, but I just can't let it sit out there either. And like I said, that's why I brought John in, and certainly he is on the same page with me regarding it. Both of us, having done this for as long as we have, it pays to be cynical. But that doesn't mean that you blow things off either just because you are so cynical. There's an amount of due diligence that is needed, and certainly it's needed here. And there are things that, for example, in Haydar's family, they believe that if they believe it, then we have to take a look at it. Is this plausible? Is this believable? And there are a lot of things that were going on in Connecticut in the years after. And when you have somebody in a position of respect and authority makes a comment like, that's not something I want to touch because it's a little dangerous. And that has been said in this disappearance on the record in a courtroom. I think you're in that. Some of this is already in public. I'm not giving away anything. If you were to do a search, you'd see. So these are things that I just didn't feel comfortable just doing it myself. Wanted to bring John in, get his eyes on it, and make sure that when it is made public and the coverage is made public and all the information is made public, that all of you know that we did our best to try to flesh some of these things out and not just leave them sit out there. And you'd be like, well, why? This really feels like you gave us a lot of conflicting information, and we don't want to do that. So that is the first project. Haydar Abushaker, he went missing from Connecticut way back in 2011, leaving behind a wife, and his wife had quadruplets. Like, I think a year or two before he went missing, something like that, which was crazy. So that's something John Lorden and I are working on with the help of Dana, Haydar's niece, and some other people in his family. The next behind-the-scenes project that I've been working on, and this has been going on, it's been going on so long, I thought this series would come out in 2025. It did not, for a variety of reasons, including maybe me just being a little too ambitious and not fully appreciating how slow the wheels of government move. But these are the Florida Atlantic Coast disappearances. That's going to be a series, like I said, hopefully before the end of this year. And that involves the disappearance of Teresa Hickman and Angela Westbury. We're also going to include a prior missing person covered on Unfound, Tony Schwark. And this is going to take us into the world of 1980s. If you think Miami Vice, it's going to take us into the world of cocaine trafficking through the Caribbean up into Florida, not just up the Atlantic coast, but up the coast on which I live, the Gulf Coast. And because it seems that these two young women most likely went missing due to that. Now, how did this come about? And then I'll continue. And how did this come about? Well, early on in Unfound's existence, first of all, you should know that I've known about Teresa and Angela's disappearances for a long time. Certainly going back to the 2000s, certainly to like 20 years ago, let's say at least. How that came to be, I don't know. But if you don't know, these were two young women. Teresa had been in the military but got dishonorably discharged, as we now know now. And she was a few years older than Angela, but they worked together and over in the Jacksonville area. And the story is that they were invited to go get on a boat and go for a trip on a boat with some guys, and that they would be back the next day or something like that. Teresa's father took them down to the boat. They got on the boat, never to be seen again, although Teresa did call her parents a couple times, not the next day, but like a week later, a few weeks later. But Angela never heard from again. And much like you could say the Peggy and Patty McDaniel disappearances, coincidentally also here in Florida, you have two young women who go missing, and it's just like there's nothing out there. Remember, when Unfound covered the McDaniel sisters' disappearances, there was nothing out there. For example, there was only a picture of one of them on the entire internet. We did the coverage in 2017, and by later that year, December of that year, their mother, Joyce, was being honored at Florida's Missing Persons Day in Tallahassee. How do I know? I was there. And it's, I think, once again, some of the best work that has been done by the podcast. And now everybody knows about the McDaniel sisters, whereas back in 2017, I don't think anybody knew about it, even though they were on the Charlie Project and NamUs. But you just wonder how that happens. Two sisters go missing at the same time, and everybody's like clueless. In fact, it got to a point with them where I spoke to one of the investigators on their disappearances. I was still living in Madeira Beach, so this must have been 2018 or something. And this guy didn't even remember them. Now, maybe he was an old guy. You could tell talking to him on the phone. Did he have Alzheimer's or something? I don't know. He didn't even remember them. So with Teresa Hickman and Angela Westbury, kind of the same thing. How can two young women go missing and just, that's about it. In fact, you even go back to newspapers.com to that era of 1984, 85, 86. No coverage. Zero. All it was, they got on a boat, went missing. Boat was seen down in Grand Cayman. Don't know what happened to the boat. Don't know who the guys were. Nothing. That's Coast Guard said they saw the boat. That's about it. And so that's always intrigued me. But how this came about was I ended up using Teresa Hickman and Angela Westbury's disappearances early on in Unfound's existence as a test. True story. When people would contact me and say, hey, I'd like to help you with the podcast. I'd like to do, help you do research, or, I'm good at finding stuff and everything. I'd say, okay, here is my Teresa Hickman and Angela Westbury file. See what you can do with it. That's a true story. Maybe some of you were some of those people. And I would be able to tell very quickly whether this person had what it took to be an assistant of mine. Now, you may say, well, did you do that with Emily? Did you do that with Sheree? Did you do that with Gary? No. They brought me their own work that they showed that they had already done. Of course, Eric, too. All of them. They had done their own work. Maybe you could almost say their reputations even preceded them a little bit. And so they didn't have to be given the Hickman Westbury test. But all these other people got it. Nobody passed it. They'd get back to me within a few days. I don't know what to do with this. I can't do this. I don't have time to do this. This is how if you're ever wondering, well, I need some people to help me out. You give them a tough task and see what they do with it. It's true. Because it's tough, because there's nothing out there. And I wanted to see how they would handle a difficult situation. None of them handled it very well. So the file sat. I did talk to Teresa's parents. Her father's now deceased. They're very old. Even at the old time, they were old, and now he's deceased. I keep in touch with the sisters of Angela Westbury. I've never spoken to, I think her parents are dead. But in fact, I keep Angela's sister, one particular sister, informed of everything that's been going on. And I've tried to reach out to Teresa Hickman. She has two sisters. They've not gotten back to me. I've been told, I kind of learned that maybe they've washed their hands of this entire thing. But what eventually happened was that Assistant Eric, who, of course, has been around for a while, he was originally a guest on Unfound for Donna Michelenko. Must have been 2024 that I gave the file to him. I said, Eric, and it wasn't a test. Eric's fantastic. He doesn't need to prove his abilities at all, but it was still on my mind. And I said, hey, Eric, see what you can do with this. and didn't take very long that he was already in touch with the Coast Guard, made a contact there, and it just all flowed from there. Now, it helps that the person that Eric ended up contacting and has built a relationship with, I've also spoken to this guy at the Coast Guard, has been doing some independent work on the side on Teresa and Angela's disappearances. How coincidental is that? It's fantastic. And so this is how Unfound is now linked up with the Coast Guard. And yes, maybe somewhere down the road, maybe we can even get them looking over here at the Gulf, maybe at Omar Shear, Dave Madot, and Kent Monroe's disappearances. Of course, the Marco Island 3. Maybe we can do that after we're done with this. But some FOIAs have been done, and this particular Coast Guard investigator has done a lot of spectacular work. A lot of spectacular work on Teresa and Angela's disappearances, and has discovered a lot. And that's why I've said, when I've been talking about this project, that when we do get to publish it, and I interview Eric, and I interview this Coast Guard person, maybe a couple of them, I interview some people in Angela's family, I'm still hoping that I can get to somebody in Teresa's family. One of her sisters, she has 2 sisters. Maybe one of them will open. Like I said, they seem to be pretty closed off right now. Maybe we can get that to change. When we can put this all together, and who knows who else I'll be able to reach out to and get on the record. It's going to finally expose all of this, and it won't be such a big mystery. And this is one of the situations where, I had some ideas of what I thought happened to them. I was wrong. I was kind of right, but I was a lot wrong too. And what I rejected is what seems to be true. And in fact, their disappearances even have several Pinellas County connections. What county is that? That's the county where I live over here so they went missing over in the Atlantic Ocean, of course, the whole way on the other side of Florida. But some of this disappearance is actually connected to the Clearwater, St. Pete area over here on the west side of Florida. Of course, something that no idea, zero, when I first gave my information to Eric back in 2024. In fact, I don't think, other than the Coast Guard investigator, I don't think anybody knew that. And now who knows it? Me and Eric. And of course, I'm being very vague telling all of you, but we'll get specific when the time is right. So that is the second big project that has been going on. Like I said, I thought it would have been all public by now, but it takes a little more time than I could have predicted. And there's still information to collect. Would love to find out what actually we're still I would love to find out what happened to this boat that they went on. And there are some other things. Maybe we can make that happen before we make this into an official series. But for now, please go check out, do Google searches, go to the Charlie Project, read about them. But I'm telling you, you're only getting about, I'm not going to say it's 1/10 of the story, but you're only getting about 1/4 of the story. So that is the second project that is a guarantee eventually to become a series of episodes. We'll just have to see how quickly we can make that happen. And the third project that I was working on by myself until recently is the disappearance of Cindy Anderson. And like I said, I can't go into any specifics. It's all private for now. But how did this come about? What is it about this disappearance? Because you could say maybe that, I've already told you. How do we come across Hadar Abishakra? Me just looking for Connecticut disappearances, and somehow just how it works out. For Teresa Hickman and Angela Westbury, I've just known about their disappearances for a while, and I was just wondering, it's just this, couple paragraph story. We have two young women missing, and people is seemingly just kind of accept it. Why is that? Well, with Cindy's, it came about in a very unusual way. But this is the one. I'm not making any guarantees whether this will be an episode or not. But I'm happy to tell you of how it came about and generally what's been going on. If you remember last year, I interviewed Doug Eastwood. Remember, he's the guy that wrote the book on the disappearances of Julie Weflin and the three other women. He was on, of course, way back when, had John Paulos on to talk about it too. But Doug wrote a book. He did more research, kind of coming it from a different angle, had him on. Well, after I got his book, I started thinking, well, maybe I'll go back on Amazon and maybe there's some other good disappearance books or something like that. Maybe I can have another author on somewhere down the road. So I ended up, of all things, getting this book. It's called Vanished in the Northeast, Real Stories of Missing People. Now, before you go to Amazon and think about getting it, do not buy this book. It is horrible. It is horrible. The author's name, I'm not even going to read the author's name. This is surely a book that was written with AI. And whatever this author's name, and of course, me being a missing persons guy and using all sorts of databases to track down people, I could not verify that this author on the name of this book even exists. I think it's done by somebody fake or somebody real but with a different name and just created an AI disappearance book. But what they cleverly did was they sprinkled it in with some real disappearances, but a lot of these disappearances don't exist. There's names, there's dates, there's locations, there's descriptions. They didn't happen. Yes, really. Yes, really. Do not buy this book. Well, I went through it anyway. I did buy it. Here it is. I might as well look at it. This happened, like I said, like last summer. Summer of 2025. And Maura Murray's in this book. I think Jennifer Kessie's in this book. And some other disappearances that you know. But like I said, the rest of them are fake. But I came across this disappearance of Cindy Anderson from Toledo, Ohio. Disappeared in 1981, August of 1981, just after I turned 11 years old. I was like, is this one real? Reading it, she disappeared from a law firm. Really? Looked her up. By gosh, she did. And by golly, it was actually even in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Well, this sounds like something. This, gets my attention. It's a real one. You have to read in so many fake ones. You come across a real one again. It's like, oh, finally. Because I did check. I don't even know how many disappearances are even written in this book. Maybe 30? Somewhere in there. I would say at least 20 of them are fake. I'm not making that up. But Cindy's, of course, is a real one. And you have to admit that a disappearance in broad daylight from a law firm, and she was there, her car was there, and all that, it's going to get your attention. You know, there aren't people disappearing from law firms all the time. Whereas, if we were to think of disappearances of women working the night shift at convenience stores, of course, we know several of those have happened. Maybe most well-known is Jessica Haringa from Michigan. That guy went to jail. She's still missing. But you can see several disappearances like that. But a person going disappearing, a person going missing from a law firm, well, what's up with this? And I didn't even know at that point that it was an Unsolved Mysteries episode that came out in 1988. But I ended up reading about it. There were news articles on newspapers.com about it. And, of course, family members' names and all of that. And I was able to track down her sister, older sister, Christine. And Christine and I really hit it off really well. I think she just goes by Chris. I keep calling her Christine when I write her notes and everything, but in her email name, it's just Chris. But I don't know. I'm weird like that. But we hit it off. I told her how I came across Cindy's disappearance. And I told her I was very interested in. I knew right away this is something that was going to be a long-term project. And then I've spoken to Cindy's brother Jim, and did some quality work. Of course, I still have a podcast to put out, but in my spare time, tracking down things. They put me in touch with people, additional people they thought that I needed to talk to. And it's going well. But once again, I'm not sure if it's ever going to become an episode. I don't want to make any promises on that. But just within the last month, I've decided to include Eric in this as well. Mainly because he's moved from where he lived, and he now lives, I'll just say, kind of near Toledo, Ohio, and that might be useful maybe within, sometime in the upcoming months. Of course, I live in Florida. But I think him being there, near there, and I introduced him to, Jim and Chris, and they've gotten along well. But this is a project where, just like maybe like Haydar Abu Shakras, is really trying to figure out, well, what exactly happened here? And if you want to go to YouTube and find the Unsolved Mysteries, it's on there, the coverage. And it came out, of course, she went missing in 1981. The episode came out in 1988. They used a couple of lawyers from that law firm as playing themselves in the reenactment. And there are some other people who either knew Cindy well or encountered her not long before she went missing that have been tracked down. And so I've been working on this since last summer, once again, in my spare time. I've talked to several people from that time. Unfortunately, a couple of the lawyers who worked at the law firm are deceased now, but one is still alive. But Eric is now involved in it as well. And yes, if you're thinking, well, this sounds familiar. Yes, a friend of the podcast, Heather Grotman, coincidentally, her latest episode of her blog and her podcast, she does podcasts now too, is on Cindy Anderson. How about that? I did talk to her, Heather, before she released that. She knew that I was working on Cindy's and Cindy's disappearance, and Heather did her own work, but we did have a conversation about, I'm not going to get into what it was, but a couple conversations about particular items that needed to be clarified. Because once again, as I've found out, there are many things that are accepted about Cindy's disappearance that I now know, that Eric now knows, that Chris now knows, that Jim now knows, that aren't true. And so that'll be part of, it's been part. If there's nothing else, we've established that. But what happened to her? No signs of violence. The office was locked. She and her purse were missing. It seems like she was doing her nails and something went on. Like I said, no signs of violence, no witnesses, nothing. So we're going to do our best to try to narrow it down a little bit, as if there are suspects, well, then who should it really be? A lot of names have been thrown around over the years. Well, do all of those names make sense? If you want to think it that way, what are the odds, maybe? Put it that way. I like to put it that way. What are the odds that this person or that person could have caused Cindy's disappearance? Or do we have to be open to the idea that nobody caused her disappearance but Cindy? There's still some people that need to be talked to. Frankly, there have been a couple people that have been avoiding us. I'm not necessarily saying that's suspicious, but we come in good faith. All you have to do is talk to us. But it's all been going well. All of these projects have been going well. Hadar's has been going well. It's been slow. But with the Coast Guard and Teresa and Angela's disappearances, it's still very good work. Ultimately, new information is going to be made public. Who knows where that might take us? And maybe it'll get solved somehow. Unfortunately, when you hear about women going on a boat and not coming back, you can't help but think they ended up in the water. But we'll see. And then here with Cindy Anderson, it's been going pretty well. Like I said, a couple people that are avoiding us. They were totally different people in different parts of Cindy's life. So no, I'm not going to say, well, the reason they're not talking to us is because they conspired to cause her disappearance. That surely did not happen. In fact, I don't even think, even though they both knew Cindy, I don't think at least a couple of these people even knew each other. So if that's what you're thinking, I just don't think it's that. And something that I should add, so that's the third project, but if I wanted to go 3.5 projects, as I've said a few times, although I don't talk about my theories on disappearances easily or just throw them out there, I think it was pretty clear going back to the original Julie Weflin episode and then me interviewing Doug Eastwood last summer. I do not believe that Will Parks had anything to do with Julie's disappearance at all. Zero. And if I had to go to a half a project, I think I'm going to throw myself at that as well. Now, obviously, I can't do as much work as John Polis has done, as Doug Eastwood has done. But I now have a much more solid idea about what I think happened. And maybe even I have a name that is a much smaller project than these three that I've mentioned that is going on as well. And then you're wondering, how do you get that podcast done? When you don't have a girlfriend, don't have any kids, don't have any pets, I guess you got the time. So now I want to go to, well, you talked about this evolution and everything. Well, what does that mean? Now that you know about what's been going on behind the scenes here, what does it mean? What it means, here's something that I just realized. It's so weird that I just realized this recently. I am a person who, I'm a little bit of a chameleon. And I am not resistant to change, and I adapt very easily. And just to give you an example, this is just something I realized recently, like since 2026 started. I go back to 1995. And once again, I think this is important for all of you to understand. I think you've all gotten to know me very well. I think I'm very open about my life and, all my stories that I tell on the live show about things other than true crime. I talk about disc golf and trivia, and, I had sleep issues this time last year. By the way, I'm sleeping fantastically. I had a lucid dream last night where I was in the dream. I knew I was in the dream, and I got some people within the dream to sing Silent Lucidity from Queensryche with me. True story. That happened. That happened last night. Anyway, if you go back to 1995, I was a drag racer. I worked for my family in the car business, and I even had my own kind of car business. I was living at home in Gilpin Township in Pennsylvania. If you'd have told me in 1995 that 10 years later I would be living in Las Vegas, I would have already at that time had worked for Star Trek The Experience for 4.5 years and already been done working there by 2005. If you'd have told me that I would have been involved in a film festival, that I would be acting, that I would be writing screenplays, that I would be, making independent movies with other filmmakers in Las Vegas, all of that. If you'd have told me that in 1995, but 2005, that would be happening, I would have told you are on drugs. But it happened. It happened. One of those years, like 2000, 2005, some of the most formative years of my life. But in 2005, as all that was going on, if you would have told me in 2005, in 10 years, so 2015, you're going to be living in Florida. You're not going to be doing any filmmaking anymore. In fact, you could not be even further away from doing that. Instead, you'd be writing some novels. In fact, really would not really even have a job at that time. That I would be obsessed with this sport called disc golf. That, that I would just be starting to dabble in this kind of thing called true crime, like actually as a community, even though I'd been taking interest in disappearance. I was only around then maybe becoming aware there was this true crime community. That I, like I said, wouldn't live in Las Vegas anymore. I'd be living in Florida. All these changes. If you told me in 2005, by 2015, my life would be that different, I would have told you, you're crazy. But it happened. It happened. Just like that. Picked up one day, left Las Vegas in 2011. But back in 2015, if you would have told me in the year 2025, here's what's going to be going on in your life, Ed. You would have been doing a podcast for 9 years, 500 some episodes. You would have testified in a murder trial. You would have spoken to, criminal justice majors at universities in Florida about disappearances, teaching them about disappearances. That you would have long hair as if you just came out of a hair metal band from the 1980s. that you would actually be taking rock singing lessons and actually getting pretty good at it. That you wouldn't, although you still play some, you wouldn't be obsessed on disc golf as much as you are in 2015. That you would be living on the beach. If you'd have told me all of that in 2015, I would have said, you're insane. But it happened. Where I'm going with this is that I can't help but think that what I'm doing right now, but when I get to be 65, it's probably going to be kind of the same thing. Now, I can surely tell you all that disappearances in my life aren't going anywhere. This is really what I know that I'm supposed to do with my life. That's not changing. But I can't ignore that 88% of Unfound's cases are still unsolved. And on 95% of those, nobody is doing anything. Except for families, of course, coming on the podcast and posting things on their Facebook pages and everything else. But real investigations, 95% of them, nothing. In addition, I really am a real world type of guy. I don't play video games. You know, my sport, disc golf, you go out and play it. You don't play it on your phone. You don't play it on your TV. You don't play it on your laptop. It's real. It's out there with real physics and everything else. And I do like to think of myself as a real world guy. Whether it has with dating or anything else, I do that out there, not on the computer, even though I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all these things. But maybe it's just because I'm a Gen Xer. I believe in doing things out there. And, you know, it's weird to me that I see so many like retired cops and airline pilots and everything. They're like, man, I really want to be a YouTuber and I really want to be a podcaster. Whereas I find myself wanting to go the opposite direction at this point. Not that I don't like podcasting. I love it. But I have convinced myself that I can do better out there than anybody who is out there currently. As much as I like some of the people out there trying to do things, you know, out there solve disappearances, I really do believe that I'm better. And so, you know, within all of this, something has to give. And like, this is why I've mentioned right when I started this, is that it's about evolution. It's about change. The only thing constant is change. And so this is telling you about these projects that are going on behind the scenes is a template for, I think, the future of this podcast and for the future of me. You know, because, frankly, the private investigators of the United States, they're not getting it done. These retired cops who take on a disappearance just because they're bored golfing aren't getting it done. And I could bring up other groups who, you know, have decided to wade in all this thinking they can do something. They're not getting it done either. In fact, a lot of them are con artists. They're frauds. As all of you know, I'm no fraud. And I truly believe that I can solve some of these. I've convinced myself of that. And that's not speaking from naivete. I've already shown, as I published those stats recently, that I can predict with 89% accuracy the resolutions to disappearances. 89%. And I'm the only, this is how serious I take it. Because there's nobody else out there keeping track of their stats on whether they're getting things right or not. I think I'm the only person that does that. Because you learn from your mistakes, but I think that we have so many people making mistakes and they get things wrong. Well, we got to move on to the next one. Don't mind the man behind the curtain. I can't do that. So, this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. What's going on behind the scenes? I know you find it interesting. You should. And I appreciate that. And the work will continue. And don't worry, there are going to be Friday episodes for the foreseeable future, I can assure you. But eventually, Unfound is going to become a real-world phenomenon. And not just an internet one. And I invite all of you to go on this journey with me. So that's all I have for this behind the scenes episode. And if you're wondering how's my car shopping going, I know that I've mentioned that on the live show. Still looking for one. The big problem has been where the cars are that I'm looking at. They're snowed in. So the independent techs that I've hired to go look at these cars because they're far away, I can't do it myself. Can't do it because of the weather. It'll get done eventually. I'm willing to be patient, but that's once again part of that evolution. Nothing can quite change your life like taking possession of another car. That's going to be, of course, part of your life. You know, our cars become part of our lives. And that's going to be happening for me. So it's another one of those changes in my life. My Hyundai Sonata has been fantastic. And really, if it wasn't burning oil, I'd be keeping it. But it is. And it's there's no fix for it. There's only driving it and continuing to put oil in it. And I'm not going to do that. So that's part of it. Once again, one more part of this evolution. That's all I have. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great week. I've already done the interview for next Friday's episode. It was a long interview, 3 hours, but it deserves it. So it's going to be 3 parts. I'll probably break it up. They'll all come out in the same day. You know how I do it. I never string these things out for weeks, ever. I realize you get overwhelmed if you see like a 3-hour episode. Oh, my gosh. And so I know some other podcasts, they'll just space it out. 1 hour this week, 1 hour the next week, 1 hour. I can't do that. I just like to get it all done at one time. So I'll split it up for you. But all the episodes are coming out on the same day. You'll manage. And it's a disappearance that is surely a murder. I'm Ed Denzel, and you've been listening to Unfound.